Peter Schweizer, who is joining me right now. And Peter, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Oh, it's great to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, now, Peter, I first of all absolutely love this book and this topic because this is something that I've been talking about for so long that sort of just goes beyond party lines. Both Republicans and Democrats do that. And just give us a basic synopsis of what you found out sort of researching this book and just what's going on up in Washington.
Well, there's a couple of things that I think are different looking at the problems that we have in D.C. The first is that money in politics is not just about winning election and re-election, that they have created these committees and other entities that really allow them to raise money and then to use that money to subsidize their lifestyle. If they funnel donations or contributions through these committees, they can use it for all kinds of things like international travel with their family, going to golfing resorts, staying at five-star resorts around the country, you name it. The second point that I try to make is that, the problem that we face with money in politics, it's not just a question of bribery, where the innocent politician goes to D.C. and outside forces corrupting because they want something. That certainly happens. But I think what also happens, maybe even more frequently, is that politicians go to D.C., they recognize the power they have, and that the financial transaction between outsiders and politicians is more akin to extortion than it is bribery. In other words, they sort of have the upper hand, and they basically compel outsiders to make donations, and it functions in a way kind of like organized crime does, frankly.
Well, I thought it was very interesting, and this is a story that I've been talking about for a long time, and it was a piece that was written a year or so ago by Timothy Carney from the Washington Examiner, and he told a great story about Orrin Hatch and Microsoft and how this was back during, when the Department of Justice was going after Microsoft, and how basically Orrin Hatch said that, Microsoft wasn't involved in the political process and they were being cheap and they needed to get involved, and so now Microsoft is involved. And I think that is not an isolated case, that this happens all the time. And they mentioned how, Bill Gates, when he started the company, all he wanted to do was just make software and create jobs and pay his taxes, and that would be enough. But no, he's got to play the game. And now they're saying it's happening to Walmart, it's happening to Apple, Google's next. And so it's essentially like the politicians think they're smarter than these CEOs and these companies and go after them. And then it gets all out of control, and then it ends up that the companies end up controlling the politicians.
No, I mean, that's a great way to look at it, and Tim Carney is a terrific reporter. I actually interviewed the chief operations officer of Microsoft at that time, and he told me in an interview that the reality is that if you are a successful company in the high-tech sector, you may not be interested in Washington, D.C., but Washington, D.C. is interested in you. And really, if you get financial success, you are going to become a target because they now see this big pot of money over there that can be exploited. And that's really the problem. There was a survey done a couple of years ago that asked corporate executives, why do you give money to politicians? And the largest answer, the most significant one, over half of them said the main reason that they gave because they feared if they didn't, bad things would happen to them and to their company. And, the reality is that a lot of corporations give equally to both sides. It's not because they're schizophrenic. It's because essentially these donations function as a form of protection money. If they give donations to whoever gets elected, they then feel like they are somewhat safe and protected, and that the politician won't go after them.
And it was very interesting because I read your piece in the New York Times about a week or so ago in which you talked about two main strategies. And one of them was toll booth, and one of them, of course, were called milker bills. And what I found most interesting was how you pointed out how one of the best politicians at the toll booth procedure was House Speaker John Boehner, and one of the best politicians at the milker bills was President Barack Obama. And it shows that this isn't a Republican-Democrat issue. The people should be coming together and saying that both sides, no matter how much we like one politician or the other, both sides are doing this. And we have to stop it on both sides. And I think this is something, we talk about the polarization of this country. This should be one thing that should bring us all together.
Yes, I would certainly hope so. The bottom line is that I believe human nature is a constant. And if you put individuals, whether they have a D or an R after their name, and you give them this much power and this much sway and influence over the affairs of government and over the affairs of the economy, they are bound to be attracted to the idea that they can extort donations. And, John Boehner is very good at the toll booth. His predecessor, Nancy Pelosi, was very good at the toll booth. Barack Obama is very, very good at milker bills and sort of protection money through the Department of Justice. And any president that comes in could have the potential as well because they have that much power. And I think that's really the core issue. To the extent that the federal government can do something for you, it can do something to you. And so when we give individuals this much power, you are going to find a lot of them are going to take advantage of it and use it to extort and extract money for self-enrichment from other people.
I got to tell you, the first time I saw an example of this, there was a movie out done on about Jack Abramoff called Casino Jack, starring Kevin Spacey and some other people. And there's a great scene in the movie where one of his sort of assistants, one of the lower level guys, is real upset because a bill that was supposed to be that protected one of their clients got passed through the house. And he's like, I got to go tell Jack Abramoff and the guys about this bill passing. And they go in there and they're celebrating. And he goes, didn't you guys see the news? What's going on? He goes, oh, yeah, now the Senate and now our clients are going to have to pay double or triple to make us kill this bill in the Senate. And so, I saw that scene and I said, oh, my gosh, there's something inherently wrong with the system.
Yeah, there is. And, it's a question of so much of what goes on in D.C., I think. We wonder, why does nothing get done? Why don't they tackle problems? Part of it is that all the money, all the upside, the way that D.C. works, essentially, you don't get paid for solving problems. You get paid for creating problems and for problems perpetuating. Because if things ran smoothly in Washington and issues were being tackled efficiently, nobody would feel the need to hire the family members of politicians as lobbyists. Nobody would feel the need to spend a lot of money on campaigns and these other favors. So the system, very much by its nature, creates this desire and this impulse and incentivizes politicians to muck things up. So I think we've got to look at fundamentally changing that incentive structure, as it were, to where the incentives are all geared towards them serving us rather than serving themselves.
And Peter, before we run out of time, it is election day, in an off year. But is the key to solving all of this? You talked about changing the way the incentives work. Is it political participation? I mean, you look at the math, and I've talked about this extensively on my show, that when you only got 10, 15% of people showing up for elections, essentially the majority of the population, the politicians can not listen to and still win elections. So is it about political participation? Is that the way that we solve this problem?
That is certainly one important component. We were getting to the point with the sort of the micro-targeting and the technology that politicians have that we're no longer selecting our leaders. Our leaders are selecting us. Mm-hmm. In other words, they look at a community and they say, okay, here, turnout is very low, so we basically need to get 7% of the people to vote for us, and we will win. Here's how we find those 7%. Let's go out and get them to the polls. That is the point where you have leaders selecting the electorate rather than the other way around. And that's because, and I understand why, people are sort of so disgusted by the process that they just feel like there's no change that they can make. I don't think it's apathy. Mm-hmm. I think it's anger and frustration, but you can't allow that to prevent you from participating because that's certainly what they want.
Well, Peter, I appreciate you taking the time this morning to join us. Like I said, it's an absolutely fabulous book, and I'm glad someone finally put it on paper, what all of us have known have been going on, but someone actually did the research and got to the bottom of it. And so, once again, thanks so much for coming on this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Once again, that was Peter Schweizer, author of the new book, Extortion, How Politicians Extract Your Money, Buy Votes, and Line Their Own Pockets. It is available now. Like I said, you have to pick up this book, not for this year's election, but for next year's election when we're electing congressmen and senators. You can understand the anger that you are seeing in America right now when you read that book about what is going on in Washington. And you need to know about it, and you got to tell your friends. All right, we got to go to a break here. It is 8:16 on this election day, November the 5th, 2013. I'm Tyler Cralle. We'll be right back.
This is
Tyler Cralle.
Radio.
Only on 980 The Way.